Exposing the ultimate betrayal. My boyfriend's secret life and devastating cheating story. I remember the day I met Aiden as if it were yesterday. I was in my last year of college, focused on my studies and building a career. Romance was the last thing on my mind until he came along. Aiden was charming, a bit mysterious, with a warmth that drew people to him. I'd see him around campus, always surrounded by friends, but he had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room when we talked. It was captivating. Our connection grew fast. We'd spend hours talking, laughing, and sharing dreams about the future. He made me feel like I'd found something rare and special. We started dating, and as our relationship deepened, I couldn't imagine my life without him. Aiden was attentive, always calling to check on me, surprising me with little gifts, and never missing a chance to tell me how much he cared. Life felt perfect, and everyone thought we were the ideal couple. After we graduated, we both found jobs in the city. Aiden started working long hours at a new tech startup, which was demanding but exciting for him. I understood. I was busy with my own job too. At first, it didn't bother me that he was working late nights or having team dinners. I wanted to support him, knowing it was a crucial time in his career. But soon, things started to change. One evening, Aiden mentioned he'd be meeting an old friend from high school, just to catch up. When he came home, he was quieter than usual, almost distant. I asked him how the dinner went, and he just said, "Good," before heading straight to bed. I brushed it off, thinking he was just tired. But that was the first of many times he'd come home late, with vague answers about where he'd been. Then came the night that I couldn't ignore. We were out for dinner with friends, celebrating a birthday, and I noticed him constantly glancing at his phone. He'd excuse himself every so often, disappearing to take calls, claiming it was just work. At first, I thought nothing of it, but as the night went on, it became clear he wasn't fully there. When I asked him about it, he shrugged it off, saying he was just checking on some last-minute details for a project. One evening, I was cleaning our apartment when I found a small box under the bed. It was a silver bracelet, delicate and beautiful, not the kind of thing Aiden would buy for himself, and I hadn't received anything like it. I asked him about it casually, hoping it was some surprise gift, but his reaction startled me. He laughed it off awkwardly, claiming he'd bought it for a colleague as a birthday gift and forgotten to bring it to work. But something about his reaction didn't sit right with me. Over the next few weeks, the feeling only grew. Aiden became more secretive, guarding his phone and taking calls in other rooms. He'd get messages late at night, and when I'd ask about them, he'd say they were work-related. I tried to believe him, convincing myself that it was just my imagination. But every time he brushed off my concerns, the uneasy feeling in my chest grew stronger. One day, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I sat him down and asked him directly, "Is there someone else?" He looked at me, surprised and almost offended, and assured me that I was overthinking. "I'd never do that to you," he said, reaching for my hand. He was so convincing, so sure of himself, that I felt guilty for even asking. I told myself that I was just being paranoid and decided to let it go. But that decision didn't bring me any peace. In fact, it made things worse. I found myself constantly on edge, watching for signs, noticing every little detail that felt off. I wanted to trust him, but every time he went out without a clear explanation or came home late, the doubt crept back in. Then came the night that changed everything. Aiden was out again, saying he had a team dinner, but this time he hadn't texted or called me for hours. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. So I did something I'd never done before. I drove to the restaurant he'd mentioned, hoping to surprise him. But when I arrived, I didn't see him or any of his colleagues. I waited for nearly an hour, but he never showed up. When he finally came home, I asked him how the dinner was, and he gave me the same vague response he always did. I decided to confront him, telling him I'd been to the restaurant and hadn't seen him. He looked shocked, caught off guard, and stammered, saying they'd changed locations at the last minute. But I could see the panic in his eyes. He wasn't expecting me to check up on him, and he was struggling to keep his story straight. That night, I couldn't sleep. I felt betrayed, lost, and heartbroken. I started questioning everything, our relationship, the time we'd spent together, and whether I'd been blind to the signs all along. The next day, I decided to find out the truth once and for all. When Aiden left for work, I went through his things. Something I'd never done before. I hated myself for it, but I needed answers. In his drawer, I found a second phone. My heart stopped. I knew immediately that this was what he'd been hiding. I turned it on, and the messages and calls were there. From a woman named Claire. I read through their conversations, seeing the affectionate messages, the plans they'd made to meet, and the countless lies he'd told me to be with her. It was like a nightmare unfolding before my eyes. When Aiden came home that evening, I confronted him with the phone. At first, he denied everything, saying she was just a friend. But as I showed him the messages, the excuses ran out, and he finally admitted to the affair. He tried to apologize, saying he'd made a mistake, that he didn't want to lose me. But his words felt hollow. The man I thought I knew had been living a double life, and there was no going back. Leaving Aiden was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but I knew I couldn't stay. The trust had been shattered, and no apology could change that. It took me a long time to rebuild my life, to trust again, and to find peace. But I learned something valuable from that experience, that sometimes the people we love the most can hurt us in ways we never thought possible. And in those moments, we have to choose ourselves, to walk away, and to remember our worth. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. At Reddit Rewind, we bring you real stories about the complexities of love and relationships. See you in the next one.